McConnell remains bound by his oath to tell the truth that he took before our lunch and recess period this day. With the defendant.
Yes, sir, Your Honor. Thank you. Mr. McConnell, good afternoon, sir. I'm going to back up just a little bit before we broke, from where we were when we broke for lunch. At 3 a.m., July 19th, 2015, you had left Luke's apartment at Shortbread. Is that about right?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. You walked out of Shortbread and in the am I correct in saying in the parking lot there, you ran into Aditya Shah Ditz?
Yes, sir.
And his car was right there in the Shortbread parking lot. Is that right?
That's correct, sir.
Where was he getting ready to go?
I assume he was going to go look for Chandler.
He had not texted you before you saw him in the parking lot about getting your help to go look for Chandler, had he?
No, sir, he had not.
He had not called you on your phone, your device, or whatever, about going to look for Chandler, had he?
No, sir.
But he was going to his car in the parking lot.
Right.
At that point, did you have an interaction with him where you in essence said, hey, you've been out at bars, why don't you let me drive us? I haven't been drinking, and we'll go look for Chandler.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Now I'm going to flash forward again about the next morning at the SIGEP house when troopers from the North Carolina State Highway Patrol were there.
Okay.
You went downstairs into a Chevy Tahoe marked with the Highway Patrol decals and all that stuff, right?
Yes, sir.
And Trooper Foster, who's seated there behind Mr. Neiman, he was in the Tahoe, wasn't he?
That's correct, sir.
And Trooper Collins, do you remember Trooper John Collins?
Very, not vividly, no.
You can't picture him, but you certainly remember that interview.
Yes, yes.
Because this is literally the next morning, that same morning.
Yes, that's correct.
You had just found out about the terrible wreck.
Right.
When you got into Tahoe, you still didn't know the gravity of what had happened.
No, sir, I did not.
The troopers told you about what had happened while you're in the Tahoe at some point in the interview.
Yes, sir.
Trooper Collins asked you if Chandler was the angry drunk type, didn't he?
I believe so, yes.
And you said no, not at all.
Right.
You said he's usually outgoing and funny.
That's correct.
He asked you if Chandler would try to hurt himself, didn't he?
I believe so, yes.
And you said definitely not.
Correct, correct.
And you said the words, "He loves life and us too much."
Correct.
You remember saying that?
Yes, sir, I do.
After that, excuse me, Mr. McConnell, he asked you sort of what was going through your mind at the time after hearing what happened and the seriousness of what had happened.
Correct.
And you You told him that you were dumbfounded and that you were in shock.
Correct.
And you followed that up by saying the words, if you would have asked me in a million years who you would least expect to do something like this, it would be Chandler Kania.
Correct.
You said those words.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. McConnell. No further questions.
Redirect.
Would it be fair to say, given the gravity of what Mr. Kania did, there's really not anybody you would expect to be the first person to do something like that, right?
Yes.
Okay. I was asking you an odd question before lunch, and did you express to somebody in our office that you kind of wanted to clarify your answer to it?
Yes, sir.
I want to give you that opportunity.
Okay.
So when I asked you if you said something to one of the troopers about the defendant when he gets drunk and doesn't get his way, did you say something about that?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what I said regarding that situation, or if I made a comment regarding that at all. So
But what are you clarifying? Sounds.
you asked me, and I said I can positively say that I never said anything like that. I believe, is that correct?
Right.
And I can't remember exactly if I said that or not, is what I'm trying to tell you.
So it's possible you did say something about that.
I just don't remember at all. Like, I don't remember being asked anything about that.
Right. And that wasn't when it wasn't a matter of being asked about it. I'm asking if maybe you not just sort of spontaneously said something about that.
I can't say for certain whether I said it or not.
Okay. Okay. Nothing further on redirect.
No, sir, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. You may stand down. For the evidence for the state of North Carolina.
Yes, Your Honor. The state calls Aditya Shah.
Hand on the Bible and raise your right. You solemnly swear the testimony about to give this court and jury to be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Finish with.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, please state your name for the record.
Aditya Shah,
Spell it.
Aditya, last name Shah.
Okay. Do you have a nickname you go by?
I do. It's Dits, Z or the S. It's DITS or C, whichever one you prefer.
Okay. What do you do? What's your occupation?
Yeah, so I'm a health policy management major at the University of North Carolina. Currently looking for full-time opportunities in healthcare consulting. Go on to hopefully med school at some point in my career.
Okay. Are you a senior?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Where are you from originally?
I'm from Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. So you were admitted to UNC as an out-of-state student?
Yes, sir.
All right. Are you a member of the Sigma Phi Epsilon fraternity at UNC?
I am.
Okay. Are you acquainted with the defendant?
Yes.
Can you tell us how you first came to know him?
Sure. So I had met Chandler about the second semester of my freshman year at college. I had met him at a fraternity event, a rush event, in fact, and that was the first time I was acquainted with Chandler.
Were you already a member at that point?
I was already a member, yes.
So did you pledge your fall freshman semester?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you consider the defendant your friend?
At the time, yes.
Okay. Do you feel differently now?
Somewhat, yes.
Okay. Does it have to do with results of this incident?
It does.
Okay. Are your feelings towards him less than friendly today?
It would be very surface level at this point, yes.
Okay. Would that lack of friendly affection towards him affect you in being honest about what happened the night of the events here?
I'm here just to tell my side of the story and the truth that happened that night.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I'm going to direct your attention to the weekend of July 17th, 18th, and 19th of 2015, the weekend that this event occurred. Do you remember that weekend?
I do, yeah.
Okay. At what point that weekend did you first come in contact with the defendant?
So I had come into contact with Chandler about 7:30 that Friday evening. I was invited and let into the Shortbread Apartments for a gathering.
Okay. So you did not have any contact with the defendant at the fraternity house prior to that?
Did not.
Okay. So first time you saw him was at the Shortbread Lofts pregame?
Yes.
Okay. There'll probably be a few, since you haven't been here for previous testimony, that some of these things have been introduced through other people.
Uh-huh.
Best you can recall, what time did you get to Shortbread?
About 11:30.
Okay. And you saw the defendant there?
He was the first one to let me in fact.
Okay. Was he consuming alcohol?
Can you clarify at what point?
Sure. Did he have a drink in his hand when he opened the door for you?
Did not.
Okay. At what point, if at all, did you see him with alcohol?
When we had gotten upstairs into the room of Rebecca Green, at that point, everyone was consuming alcohol.
Okay. So I understand you now. You're saying he's the one who came downstairs and let you into the building?
Yes, sir.
Got it. And then you got up to the room. Did you see him get an alcoholic drink at that point?
I can't recall specifically, but at some point, he was drinking alcohol, yes.
Okay. Do you remember what he was drinking?
A can of beer.
Okay. Do you remember what kind?
Don't remember the brand.
It's fine. How long were you at Shortbread?
I was probably there for about an hour. I wasn't tracking the time, so that's something I can't really recollect on very well.
That's fine. Prior to getting to Shortbread, had you consumed any alcohol?
I had not.
When you got to Shortbread, did you consume any alcohol?
I did.
Best of your recollection, what and how much at Shortbread?
Yeah, so it was a few beers. I can't recall much else, but it wasn't a significant amount
Okay.
while I was there.
It's okay if the answer is I don't remember, but do you remember if you drank anything but beer there?
I may have had some liquor, but again, I can't recall specifically.
Do you remember if you saw whether or not the defendant consumed anything other than that beer at Shortbread?
Yeah, so I personally did not witness anyone in particular consuming liquor, or the defendant consuming liquor. That being said, there was a lot out, and if I wasn't looking or whatnot, I would imagine that it was possible.
Okay. That's fair. All right, and so at some point you left Shortbread after about an hour.
Mhm.
Where,
Yes.
where did you go next?
As a group, we went to a bar called La Residence, La Res, about a 2-minute walk from the Shortbread apartment complex.
Okay. And did your group include the defendant?
It did.
Okay. How old were you on July 18th of 2015?
I believe I was 20 years old.
Okay. Were they checking IDs at La Res?
They were checking IDs.
Did you have to use a fake ID to get in?
I did.
Okay. Do you know if the defendant did too?
For anyone to get into a bar, you had to have some form of identification, so yes.
Okay. When you got there, did you consume any alcohol?
I did.
What did you drink?
So when I got to La Res, I had ordered a beer for myself and a round of shots for the group that I was with. But that was it for that particular time.
Okay, so do you remember how many shots you got?
I can't recall specifically, but about 5.
Okay. How many of those did you drink?
I had none. I had the beer for myself.
Oh, okay. Did the defendant drink any of those shots?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Did you see if or whether the defendant drank anything else at La Res?
So I personally did not see him after that initial encounter. That particular night, there was a lot of my friends at this bar, and I was disengaged with the group after coming in with Chandler. And so I have no recollection of him or personally witnessing him drinking any alcohol after that initial encounter.
Okay. And so how long were you, roughly speaking, at La Res?
I would say about an hour. I can't, the time frame is a little, it's not as specific as I would like it to be, but about an hour, yeah.
And I'll say this up front. I think that the judge and the jury will understand that you can't pinpoint the time. I'm asking for your best estimation.
Yeah.
After you left La Res, where did you go next?
Went to another bar across the street called He's Not Here.
Okay. And let me back up briefly.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get to Shortbread?
Yeah, so Shortbread is not that far of a walk from where I had originally parked for the night, which was at the Sigma Phi Epsilon fraternity. And so I walked over about a 10-minute walk, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you parked your car at the fraternity house?
Yes.
Okay. And then walked from there to Shortbread?
Yes.
And then from Shortbread to La Res, was that walking too?
From Shortbread to La Res, it was a walk, yes.
Okay. And from La Res to He's Not Here, was that a walk?
That was a walk as well.
Okay. And then when you got to He's Not Here, was the defendant with you in the changeover from La Res to He's Not Here?
It's the defendant. Could you rephrase that?
Yeah, bad question. Did you walk from La Res to He's Not Here with anybody else?
I did, with a separate group of friends,
Not including the defendant?
not including the defendant.
Okay. To your knowledge, did the defendant also go to He's Not Here somewhere around the same time?
I was not sure where he was. When I had gotten there, he was already there.
Okay. So did you see him there?
Yes,
Okay. Did you have to use an ID to get in there too?
I did.
Okay. Did you purchase or consume any alcohol there?
I did.
Okay. What do you, best you can recall, what did you get?
I believe I purchased a pint of beer, not a blue cup. Yeah,
They do sell those too?
they do sell those, yeah.
Okay. And so, just to clarify, other than the beer that you drank at La Res, that you purchased when, same time you purchased the shots for other people, did you drink anything else at La Res?
I can't recall.
Okay. And then, he's not here, did you have anything more than the pint you just referenced?
I believe it was just the pint.
Okay. All right. Okay. And do you remember if there was a band playing there at He's Not Here that night?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Who were you interacting with mainly at He's Not Here?
So mainly with the group that I had just left Laurez with, names specifically, or?
If you remember, yes.
Sure. So one in particular, Austin Hampton. I can't remember the other two, but just a separate set of friends that I was originally at Laurez with that we carried over to He's Not Here.
Okay. Austin's a member of your fraternity?
Yes.
Were the other two?
I can't recall.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Did you say He's Not Here until closing?
Yes.
Okay. And when you left, who did you leave with?
Right. So I had left with the group, including the defendant Chandler, Case, Aldridge, two of Chandler's friends, Alex and Josh. I believe that was it.
Okay. When you got out of He's Not Here, did something distract your attention?
Yeah, so that night in particular, there were a lot of police on the street. I wasn't certain of why, but enough to catch me off guard myself. And there was some commotion down the street as well. And so that was sort of the scene outside.
So were you engaging in something, I don't know if it's familiar to your age group, but were you rubbernecking? Just wanting to see what all the fuss was about?
I don't think I've ever heard rubbernecking
Yeah, I
before.
didn't think so. You didn't have any reason you needed to go over there other than your interest, fair to
Sure,
say?
sure, sure.
Okay. Okay. Do you remember if any of that group of five you enumerated, any of the others go with you?
Yeah, so of that group, we kind of got a little separated in the process. Alex and I both were rubbernecking, and yeah, so that was, and we were a little distracted in the process. And I believe, so Case and Chandler had, and I believe Josh, to my knowledge, I wasn't completely sure where Josh was in this process, but.
I'm not sure Josh was either.
But I know Case and,
It's okay, you can keep talking, is what I said.
okay. And so, we were in a parking lot next to the Beta Theta Phi fraternity, which is adjacent to the name escapes me, but the student apartment complex across behind the Beta fraternity. And
That's not Granville Towers.
that is it's Granville Towers.
Okay.
And there was a large commotion and several officers running past us, and I believe a few cars approaching that area. And so we were initially surprised at what was happening and kind of walked towards that direction, but realized after about 2 or 3 minutes that it wasn't in our best interest to be over there, and so we proceeded to go back towards the fraternity house.
Okay. From best you can do, from 1 to 10, 10 being the drunkest you've ever been and 1 being completely sober, where would you put yourself at this time?
At around after 2 in the morning, I'd say I was about a 3 or a 4. I wasn't drunk at this point, no.
Okay. And so, you said you gotten separated because of the thing, and then did you end up at some point getting at least into visual contact with the defendant after you got separated?
I did, yes.
When and where?
And so I got into visual contact with Chandler after I was informed through Alex that Chandler would potentially be driving home that night. And so my contact with Chandler was physical contact, in fact, me trying to stop him from driving home that night.
Sure. So draw it out just a little, if you can. Did Alex come and say something to you that indicated to you you thought that Chandler was going to drive?
Alex, if I recall correctly, said he had a bad feeling about Chandler, and from backing up a little bit as well, Case had walked past me, very angry as well, and so I had connected the dots into some sort of altercation between the two, and so to me, given the fact that he was angry and that Alex had a bad feeling of him driving, prompted me to try and stop him from driving his car.
Okay. You mentioned that Case came by you and he looked angry.
Yes.
Okay. Best you can recall, where were you geographically when that happened?
So in front of, so the intersection of Cameron and Columbia, in front of the Deke Delta Kappa Epsilon fraternity house, that was when I saw Case walk the other direction.
Okay. You talked about a lot of places, and I'm wondering if I were to show you an overhead map of the downtown area of Chapel Hill, do you think you would be able to recognize it and point out some locations on there to kind of orient the jury as to where these places are?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. May I approach the witness?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Shaw, I'm showing you what's been previously marked and entered as State's Exhibit 16. Take a minute to look at it, and after you've done that, if you know, tell me what you're looking at.
So, yeah, it's a map of Chapel Hill, just different locations of the night, spatially laid out. Yeah.
And in terms of the locations you've described in your testimony up till now, would you say that those locations are encompassed in this map?
They are.
Okay. Do you believe it would help to illustrate your testimony if you were able to point out some of these places to the jury to explain to them where you were then?
Sure.
Okay. Request permission for the witness to be able to step down and use the exhibit.
Yes, sir. You may move if you want.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, you could point out the SIG at house. Right here, SIG at. And then, when you said you parked your car there and then walked from there to Shortbread? Okay. Could you, best you can recall, just kind of trace your path you took from Sigat to Shortbread?
Yeah, so there's a little kind of back alley over here through this little current court. So cut through there and then walk down this street, and I believe there's a restaurant right here called Melon Mushroom. Cut through that parking lot and then arrive at Shortbread Lost right there.
Okay. And then from Shortbread to La Res, trace your path there.
Yeah, so again, this street right here, Rosemary, walk onto Rosemary, go straight
And you go straight, what?
straight up the street
To,
to Flores.
okay. And then from La Res, he's not here, show us.
So he's not here traditionally as a front entrance right here, but there's the back one to accommodate this Rosemary Street. So just through the front of Rosemary, down the street, and then to the back entrance if he's not here.
And then, you told the jury just now about how you crossed paths with Case in front of the decal Okay. So, when Case came up to you, did he stop and talk to you, or did he just walk by you?
So he walked by. He was very infuriated, and the thing that stood out to me and what I remember best is he said that Chandler is so selfish, and just kind of stormed off past me.
Okay.
That's all the interaction I had with him at that point.
Okay. So was that part? Was that part of the reason you alluded to that you were concerned about what the defendant was going to do?
Yeah.
Okay. So, after he passed you and he said, Chandler is so selfish, what did you do next?
Well, given the fact that he had just said that, and given the fact that Alex had just mentioned too that he was a little concerned that Chandler, he had a bad feeling about Chandler sort of driving, I kind of put the dots together in my head and ran towards our fraternity lot to try and stop Chandler from driving home.
Okay. Let me clarify something if you can.
Mm.
Did Alex say Chandler's going to drive, or I think Chandler's going to drive, or did he just tell you I'm worried about Chandler? Or what did he say?
I can't recall specifically, but it was along the lines of him having a bad feeling and that he was worried that Chandler would drive home.
Okay. So, are you, if you're on that corner of Columbia and Cameron, you're also kind of right in front of the Carolina Inn?
Yeah.
Are you an eye shot of the parking lot of the fraternity house at that spot?
I can't see from that angle the lot. I can see the side of the house, but I can't see the lot.
Okay. So what'd you do?
I proceeded to run towards the house, and as I approached, I saw Chandler approaching his car, and I was actually yelling at him to just yelling Chandler, Chandler, to get his attention, and I crossed the street, and I tried to tackle Chandler so that he would not get in his car, but Chandler picked me up and threw me to the ground, and me trying to stop him.
Okay. One moment, please, Your Honor. Do you think that you'd be able to demonstrate kind of with your body what you did and what the defendant did in response?
I can try to,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Request permission for the witness to step down?
Yeah, do so.
Okay.
Just in that position you said,
Okay. Do you need someone else to be able to do it, or do you think you can do it with just a shadow? All right. So,
Didn't hear it.
all right. So, could you just with your body pretend like the defendant is? Did you come up behind him?
No. So, do you want to play the role of?
If I were the defendant, what was your positioning relative to him?
In front, like this. You might have been contorted to the side a little bit, but, so you could have been like this, but I would have been approaching you
Okay.
like this.
Where is the defendant's car in this?
His car is to, I guess, your left, so on the right,
Okay.
parked in a spot, in a parking space.
Park, I'm sorry, sir.
Parked in a parking space.
Okay, so at the moment you made contact with him, was his body facing towards the car or not quite?
Not quite, but in the direction of facing the car.
Okay, All right, and so was he walking or standing still?
Sort of walking, I can't really recall specifically.
Okay.
Exact.
If I were the defendant, what did you do?
So I'm running and yelling, Chandler, stop. And I approach to try and.
It's okay.
To tackle you.
Can't hear you, please.
To
Speak up loud.
to tackle you in the process. But you swing over and then, in fact, sort of grab me from behind and.
Behind.
Or, like, again, this isn't, like, I can't, like, give you the exact choreography of how
Sure.
this happened, but, sure, I'm around, and then you sort of pick me up
Okay.
on the side, and then push me down, and I land on my head on the pavement, on the ground below me, so I land on my back.
Okay. All right, you can retake the witness stand. So, in terms of this physical altercation, was it relatively short-lived?
Yeah, it wasn't a long, enduring process. I'd been
All right.
bested very easily, yeah.
And do you remember describing someone else about kind of why you lost the fight?
I personally believe that I had a misstep, and if I had been able to reposition myself, I could have possibly tackled him and stopped everything from happening, potentially.
Were you aware of something about Chandler's history that made you think that that's why he had a upper hand in something like this?
Like Chandler's, I guess, a strong person, and so
Okay.
I don't know what you want me to answer.
Any athletics that he might have participated in that?
I can't recall, no.
Okay, fine. So, at the end of this altercation, your positioning was on your back?
Yes,
Okay. Did you hit your head?
I did hit my head.
How bad?
So, bad enough where my eyes got a little black, so a little hazy. After the fact, my phone had actually broken. That was something I showed to investigators afterwards because it was in my back pocket. So the force was enough to knock me out for about 5 to 6 seconds of disorientation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, as best you can recall, when you regained your orientation,
Mhm.
did you look up?
I did, and so I was laying on the pavement, and I look over and I see now Alex and Josh caught up. I believe Alex is at the door, or Chandler has already gotten in the car, and Alex was pleading with Chandler to get out of the car and not drive. And that's when I'm reorienting myself. That's the first thing I see.
Up to this point, do you remember if the defendant said anything to you or Alex in response to your pleas?
Could you rephrase that or repeat the?
I think what I heard you say is that you had verbally and physically attempted to stop him, and that Alex had at least verbally attempted to stop
Yeah,
him.
yes.
Do you remember if the defendant said anything back?
I can't recall anything being said from the defendant.
Okay. So now you've reoriented, you see Alex pleading with the defendant. What do you do next?
And so, naturally, at this point, I'm now mad myself because I've been hurt. And I know Alex is sort of pleading with Chandler to get out. He's being a lot nicer. I decide to just get up, and a lot of swear words were said, but it was along the lines of Chandler, get out of the car now. like I've had enough. And so the door's open, and Alex is sort of describing, pleading with Chandler, please come out. I try and reach and grab the keys from Chandler. I believe that they were sort of in the ignition, but my hands got slapped down. But Chandler had his phone in his lap.
Let me, when you say your hand got slapped down, did Alex slap your hand down?
No, Chandler slapped my hand down.
Okay. Then you said you saw his phone in his lap? What did you do next?
I was thinking, this was very quick thinking, but I personally, if someone had grabbed my phone, I would have maybe stopped and listened or tried to get my phone back. So I grabbed his phone thinking that it would be enough for him to stop or leave the car if I had his phone.
So like if not the keys, this is a backup shot at holding
Something,
one?
it's something.
Okay. Do you know if did he in some way acknowledge or respond to you having taken his phone?
There was no response. I grabbed the phone, and then as I sort of backed away, he put the car in reverse and I guess very aggressively backed out from that parking spot.
Where was your positioning relative to the Jeep when he pulled out very aggressively?
I was on the side, so this is the Jeep. The door to the Jeep is open. I'm right behind the door at this point, and Alex is still in the doorway.
Okay. So what happened to Alex when he pulled out?
So I was really surprised because I didn't think doors could go backwards, but I guess they can. And when he backed out, it hit Alex and the door sort of went backwards. So that was something I remember very vividly as well. And then he backed out and then drove away.
Okay. So at this point, he's pulling forward. Initially, he's still in the parking lot. And then did he pull out of the parking?
Yes, yes.
And then did he pull out of the parking lot?
He did.
Remember which way he turned?
I do. And the sort of level of concern kept rising because the way he left the parking lot, he had actually driven over the curve to the right onto Pittsburgh, or onto Cameron. I don't know the street name, but to the right of the fraternity.
Okay, so if you walk out the front door of your fraternity house,
Yes.
the street in front of it, right in front of you is Cameron,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay. So when you say he jumped the curb, was that the curb coming out onto Cameron or the curb turning onto Pittsburgh?
So at the time there was, I believe still so, there's a curve on the fraternity parking lot, sort of where the sidewalk meets the road. And naturally you drive on the driveway onto the pavement of the road, but he had driven over the curve and onto the road.
Cameron?
Onto Cameron, yes.
Okay. After he went on to Cameron, best you can recall, which direction did he go then?
He just went right, but again, your angle of vision gets lost in the process, so I couldn't tell if he was going straight up the road or making a right at Pittsburgh. So all I know is that he made a right onto Cameron, and that was it.
Okay. Because Pittsburgh is basically right on the side of the fraternity house too.
Yeah.
But you're saying you can't be sure if he hooked another right onto Pittsburgh or went straight on Cameron?
From where I was standing in the parking lot, that angle is the only thing I could see is him go just straight right on Cameron.
Okay. Thank you. And so what did you do then?
I was in shock, just internalizing a lot of what had just happened, because I had been sort of thrown down. I had witnessed Chandler just aggressively back his car out, which was worrying for me. And Alex and Josh were equally worried as well. because it was just very aggressive. And so I had his phone, so we couldn't call him or we couldn't do anything. So I thought to myself that was probably not the best idea, because how can I get in touch with him now?
At this point, you kind of wish he had his phone?
Yeah.
Okay.
But luckily, 5 minutes later, he came back. And so,
Let's talk about that as best you can describe. When he came back, where were you physically?
so Alex, Josh, and I were still in the parking lot. We were sort of trying to figure out what we could do to figure out where Chandler was, how to get back in touch with him, or where he would be or where he would be driving to. Just because I was not really sure of how his night was unfolding, and his friends knew better of the night because they were with him for the majority of the night. But he came back in the middle of that discussion while we were still in the parking lot. And he had pulled back into the parking lot and sort of just put his car right back into a spot on the same side of the parking lot, but a little bit lower down, and just stopped the car. And so our thinking was not to instigate him because he was mad. And so we thought potentially if we took the calmer approach and just approached Chandler and said, can you please just get out of the car? It's been a long night. Like, can we just be done with this? But I remember him looking out the window towards us. And I didn't say anything at this point. I let both of his friends try and handle it, because I think they could sympathize with him a lot better than I would have in the process.
Why do you feel that?
I mean, I was still a little mad, still a little angry. It would have been a lot more difficult for me to seem nicer in the moment.
To play the nice guy version wasn't where you were mentally?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he kind of looked back, but then it was about maybe a minute or so. I can't really tell you the exact time frame, but he backed out again and then made that same right onto Cameron, and that was the last I saw of him that night.
Okay. Let me ask you a little detail on that. So, I suspect in a lot of situations, in a heightened tension moment, seconds can seem longer than they normally are. That we're sort of all familiar with that. So you just described the amount of time that he came back and paused to be about a minute. Just want you to do your best to say, or how confident you feel about that time frame.
Speculation. I can't confidently tell you it was a minute.
Okay. Was it more than 1 second?
Naturally, yes.
Okay. And I didn't mean to ask that crossly, just want to clarify. You confident there was more than 10 seconds?
Confident it was more than 10 seconds, yes.
Are you confident it was more than 30 seconds?
I can't tell you at that point.
Fair enough. You said something, you said you remember him looking out the window. Did he look at you or to Josh and Alex or what?
So, again, this isn't the most vivid of memory, given that it was dark and at night, but I do recall Chandler looking back towards us and then looking back sort of at his dashboard or steering wheel, and just kind of staring.
And if you could, best you can recall, how far away from the Jeep were you when you were seeing this behavior?
Maybe 5 to 10 feet. I can't tell you specifically how far it was.
A better way to ask it, compare your distance from the Jeep to your distance from you to me.
Yeah, I'd say about a little bit further, maybe if you were a few rows behind, that's where I'd say the distance was.
And were you standing behind, to the side, or to the front of the Jeep?
So the way the parking lot is laid out his car is closer to the street. I'm standing towards the middle of the parking lot, closer to the house. And so the car is in front of me. I can see the left side of the car.
The driver's side?
The driver's side of the car.
Okay,
And I'm facing that direction.
okay. So I'm gonna ask you, do you know one of these weird things? Not asking you to step down right now, but if you were to compare, if I'm the defendant behind the driver's, in the driver's seat, behind the wheel, where are you relative to me being, in this case, the defendant? Point to a place in the room.
Over on the defendant's side of the room.
Okay,
Yeah.
so are you about, is it where you're kind of directly to the side or slightly to the back or something?
Slightly angled, but to the side.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Not directly to the side, if that helps.
It does, thank you. When he paused for that period of time, you're not sure, between 30 seconds, a minute, or at least, you said at least 10 seconds. Did he say anything?
He didn't say anything, no.
Did you say anything?
I told Alex and Josh to sort of mediate the situation, and have them just do what they could to get Chandler out of the car. Just because I felt that if I was going to say anything more, it would potentially instigate him to leave, and if he had already come back, that to me signaled that he wanted to stay.
Okay. Did Josh or Alex say anything to him?
I can't recall what they said exactly, but the window was closed, so I'm assuming anything they were saying most likely went unheard.
Okay. So are you, and I don't, if you don't remember, that's perfectly fine. So are you saying that you recall they did say something, just not sure what it is?
Along the lines of, Chandler, please get out of the car.
Okay. Okay. And so now, at this point, we've gotten sort of past that pause time. When he pulled out this time, how would you compare this pullout to the one you described from the first pullout?
A little similar. Again, it's hard to qualitatively describe how an aggressive pullout is, but it was fast. It didn't seem like as if I'm pulling out of a car, I would look back. I don't think there was a look back. I think it was just a fast pull out and then again onto Cameron. This time not over the curb though.
Okay. And were you in about the same place this time, so as far as where he went after pulling on the Cameron, are you equally unsure, or did you see more this time?
Again, I didn't see more than that, just right down Cameron.
Okay. So what did you do at this point?
So at this point, we waited again for a few moments, thinking that he would come back because he had come back initially. And then it was really just a group consensus of worry, because now it had escalated into something a lot bigger than us. And so my first sort of instinct was, well, I had been drinking that night, so I couldn't physically drive to see if Chandler had just went to his home. And so a friend of ours, Mason McConnell, had not gone out that night. And so he drove, I was sitting with him while he and I sort of drove around to look for Chandler, while both Alex and Josh sort of decided amongst themselves that they would go on foot to look for Chandler.
Okay. So are you saying that you enlisted Mason's help to be the sober driver?
Yes.
Okay. And he drove your car?
Yes.
All right. Where was your car where did y'all get in the car?
I can't recall specifically. Um, I believe the car was in the lot at the time, so that's the best I can remember.
Okay. Where was Mason?
Again, I can't recall specifically how I got in contact with Mason. I believe I called him, or I might have used Chandler's phone to call him, but I let him know that I think he was in the house, in the fraternity house, and I just somehow grabbed Mason to sort of help in this sort of search party for Chandler.
Okay. Can you say for sure, either confirm or deny, that your car, whether your car was actually in a parking lot over at or near Shortbread Lofts?
Yeah, so I can't recall specifically, but it could be there, yeah.
Okay. So, do you remember if you made contact through phone with Mason to get his help to drive before seeing him, or did you just run into him and ask him to drive?
Again, I can't really recall. That sort of, you have to imagine that in my head at the moment, I was more worried about where Chandler was and not necessarily the process associated with finding someone to help look for him.
Okay.
So the days after, my memory sort of,
Okay, but this is, to be fair, this is the moments after. Same thing?
assuming so, yeah.
Okay. Did you ever have a thought or intention that you were gonna drive to go find the defendant?
No,
Okay. Are you sure about that?
I'm sure.
Okay. So was it your intention from the beginning of dispersing this search party, was it your intention to find someone else to drive your car?
Yeah, that was sort of what was going on in my mind, yeah.
Okay, all right. So, you got in the car with Mason, and tell us where you went.
So, we naturally assumed that he would be at his apartment, in terms of a line of where Chandler would be. I believe his apartment is Mill Creek. Mill Creek is close by to Lux. Lux is it's an apartment complex on MLK, and so we drove there and made a few rounds through the parking lot looking for Chandler's orange Jeep. We couldn't find the Jeep there, and so we really didn't know where else to look or where else we could look to find him, because we still had his phone, so we couldn't get back in touch with him, and we had kind of gone to the last place of where we would have thought he would have been, and so we drove back up MLK, and found Alex and Josh still walking around. Told them to come back to the house, and we called it off for the night.
If you can remember, in your mind, where did that leave you as far as the defendant?
Can you elaborate?
So, I mean, had you just given up on him, or did you think maybe he'd come back, or what was in your mind as far as what you thought was likely to happen at that point?
Thought maybe he had gone to another friend's house, potentially a girl's house, but at this point I had honestly no idea of where he would have been going officially, and so we just gave up on.
Did he have a place that he liked to go late night to get food?
The only thing I can think of is like the Cookout. That's a pretty well-known, like, I think a lot of people drive there late at night to get food.
Okay. And is Cookout in Durham?
Yeah. I believe
Okay.
so.
Did he commonly go drive there late night to get food?
I can't, I have no idea. We weren't close enough friends where I could tell you that what he was doing on a daily basis type of thing.
But, I mean, there are places that serve food late at night that are walking distance.
Right.
Okay. And the place that comes to your mind first is a place that's in Durham.
It's, doesn't come to mind in my head, but to others potentially, sure.
Okay. All right. And so then you came back to the fraternity house with Mason, Josh, and Alex.
Mhm. Yes, yes.
I'm going to back up and just clarify a point. Do you remember doing an interview with Sergeant Collins of the Highway Patrol?
I do.
Okay. If you were able to see his notes from that interview, would you be able, might it refresh your recollections of some of the details that you relayed about the evening when it was fresher in your mind?
Yeah, so that account was most likely my raw sort of opinion, given the fact that it was right after, so that was the most detailed version, yeah.
Sure. Okay. Well, before we go there, let me just ask you this question. Do you remember when he pulled off the second time, do you remember if Alex had anything I'm sorry. He pulled off away from you the first time. Do you remember if Alex said anything specifically to you about what he thought the defendant was doing?
I can't recall.
Okay. May I approach the witness?
Yeah.
I'm showing you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 18. Could you just take a second and look at it and tell me if you can tell what this is?
Sure. Yeah, so this is, again, as we sort of mentioned, my raw, I guess, sort of intake of what had happened the night before. And just,
And I'm not asking you to read the whole thing, here's what I'm getting at. Do you see a portion there that's actually highlighted that discusses what Alex told you he thought Chandler was doing? Just say, for this point, yes or no, whether you see that.
I see it, yes.
Okay. Having read that now, does that comport with your memory? In other words, do you now remember hearing Alex say that?
If this is what I said, this is what I said. I can't recall at this point back to that
Okay,
point yet.
fair enough. Thank you. Backing up once again. Do you remember if, once you got the defendant's phone, if you sent some text messages from his phone to some people?
I did.
Okay. And prior to testifying, have you been shown a text thread that illustrates those texts that you sent?
I have been shown.
Okay. And if you were to see that text thread today, would you be able to tell us whether or not it's a fair and accurate depiction of the text that you sent from the defendant's phone that early morning?
Yeah.
Okay. This is one, whatever we're at. Okay. So, 47. Permission to approach the witness?
Yes, sir.
I'm showing you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 1E. Could you take a minute, look at it, and tell me if you can tell what this is?
Looks like a transcript of messages sent back and forth with different just names attached to the numbers, yeah.
And having looked at it, would you agree or disagree that that appears to be a fair and accurate depiction of the text that you sent and received on the defendant's phone that morning when you got his phone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd seek to move States 1E into evidence.
Jackson?
No, sir.
Let's go ahead.
All right. Now, first I'm going to ask you to look at the first text message that's not redacted, the first one where you can actually read the text. Just look at that,
Yeah.
and if you could read the time that is depicted next to that text.
So the first one that hasn't been redacted, it's July 19th, 2015 at 2:27 a.m.
Okay. And based upon that time or your recollection, would that moment have been after the first pull-off or the final pull-off?
That would have likely been after the final pull-off.
Okay. So do you feel comfortable saying you didn't start texting from his phone until after he'd left for good?
Until he had left for good is when I started to look at the phone and try and use it to some advantage.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And is it fair to say that the texts that proceed after 2:27 are both sent and received, all occur within the next minute or two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am going to ask you, and if you feel more comfortable, you can abbreviate the colorful words with letters. But will you please read the content of those texts, including message to and message from, etc.?
Sure. And I also plan on abbreviating them because I don't want to say it, but sure. Message from Case Aldridge, suck my D a-hole. Message from Case Aldridge, you clearly only care about yourself. Message from Case Aldridge, so F off. Message to Case Aldridge, suck a D from Dit. Message to Case Aldridge, Cancer drove off in his car. I believe it was meant to be Chandler, drove off in his car. Message to Case Aldridge, we tried to stop him, he was mad. Message to Case Aldridge, you did this. Another minute later, message to Rebecca Green, Chandler is gone, this is Dit's. Message to Rebecca Green, he got mad and left.
Okay. Let me just go through those briefly. Oops, I didn't move my cell phone. I got it right here. It's fine. Okay. The messages to Case Aldridge and to Rebecca Green that you just read, did you actually type those messages?
I did, and I left a little stamp from Ditz as well, so.
Right. So, when you made the initial sort of expletive to Case, did you mean that, or was that an invective, the sucka D?
Well, it appears that it was in response to the 3 texts that he had just said, so suck my D, a-hole, and then F off, to which I likely respond to those text messages. And I think in the moment, I was trying to piece things together as to why he was mad, and given the 3 texts from Case that were aggressive, I assumed that there was, and given what I had seen from Case earlier in the night, I assumed that this was an altercation between the 2 that caused him to be mad at the moment. And my response reflected that accordingly.
Okay. Well, I guess what I'm trying to sort out is a distinction between things you said that you regret versus things that you said and you stand by. Okay? So is the sucka D in the said and regret or the stand by category?
That's a regret, yeah.
Okay. And then the next message, when you said cancer drove off in his car, you said you think that was maybe an autocorrect or something like that?
The Chandler. Yeah.
Okay. Is that something that you said and you stand by?
Yeah, that's what happened.
Okay.
Chandler drove off in his car.
The next message, when you say we tried to stop him, he was mad, is that something that you stand by?
Yeah.
Okay. The next message, when you say you did this, is that something that you stand by?
I regret, I mean, in the moment, I explained to you what I was piecing together. So in the moment, that's what I said. At the moment, right now, I regret, yeah.
Okay. So do you blame Case for what the defendant did?
I don't blame anyone for what the defendant did.
Okay. Do you blame the defendant?
Yeah, that's, what he
Okay.
did was on his own accord, not on someone else's.
Okay. And then, almost done. Message to Rebecca Green, Chandler is gone, something you stand by?
Yes.
Okay. This is Ditz.
I can't take that away, right?
And then, the final message, he got mad and left. Do you stand by that? Okay. So now we're back to the point when you've essentially called off the search. Did you go to bed then?
I went to bed, yes.
Okay. What's the next thing you knew?
So I wake up the next morning to a knock, very aggressive knock on the door. So actually backing up to that, I wake up, I'd woken up twice, in fact. So I'd woken up earlier, around 8 or 9 in the morning. And Alex had just come in. He asked for the phone that I had taken from Chandler. And he had told me that his mom, Chandler's mom, had called him and said that Chandler was in the emergency room and that they were driving down to go to figure out what had happened, and that Alex and Josh were going to meet Chandler in the emergency room. And so naturally something had happened from the way he had driven. I had no idea what had happened. And so Alex had asked me to text Chandler's mom to give them some insight on what happened the night before, because naturally, as a mom, I'm sure you'd be very, sad or just worrisome if your child's in the emergency room. And so I sent, again, a very sort of raw, detailed report of what had happened the night before to just give Chandler's mom some insight on what had happened.
Did you send that message from your phone or the defendant's phone?
I can't remember, but I believe it was my phone.
Okay.
I can't remember from whose, but a text was sent to Chandler's mom's phone.
Do you remember what you told her? Best you can recall.
Told her the same story the night before, what had happened, and Chandler essentially leaving and us trying to stop him, and that was sort of all I knew from the night. So there was nothing else that I could report to his mom. And then Alex and Josh went to the emergency room, and I fell back asleep. And I get another knock on the door, this time around 10:30. This is the aggressive knock on the door. And it's our president with a state trooper. So I'm a little shaken up. It's not the first thing I'd like to see in the morning. And I believe it's Sergeant Collins and a few of his just deputies or whatever. I don't really know the terminology,
Fine.
but they asked me, well, your friend Chandler was in a wreck last night. Can you come outside and just tell us what happened? And so I went to one of the State Patrol vehicles and was seated in the front seat, and there were about, I believe, Sergeant Collins and his deputy in the back. I was still not aware of what had happened, and I reported my story halfway through, and I asked the sergeant, so what happened to Chandler? Is he all right? Like, did he just hit a pole? Like, what had happened? And he told me in the moment that he had killed 3 people, and that's when my heart sunk as well. And that's when I knew it was a serious situation. And so I kind of, at that point, I was already cooperating, but whatever else that I could do to give as much information, I did from that point on. But I wasn't notified of the full event until halfway through my conversation with the deputy.
Okay. To the best of your knowledge, is there anything that you told the Highway Patrol that wasn't true and accurate, to the best of your recollection?
I told Highway Patrol and whatever officers afterwards my complete recollection of the story and what I had remembered from the night before in the most complete form possible.
Okay. When, if ever, did you have any other contact with the defendant after that night?
From that night forward, I have not had contact with the defendant.
Okay. Do you think that you have sort of, I don't know if you know this term, an axe to grind with the defendant because he knocked you to the ground?
No. If there is an axe to the ground, it's the fact that a little girl is dead. That's the axe to the ground.
Okay. So do you feel compelled in any way to either embellish, exaggerate, or even lie about what you saw that night because it started or at least involved him hurting you?
No. It was just, all that was just me being completely truthful and honest about the situation,
Okay.
which involves me being here today to testify.
Okay. Were you conveyed in some way what we as the state may or may not do? Did you make any kind of an agreement with the state about you being charged with any crimes?
Yeah, so through my lawyer, I was told that I would have immunity. I personally wasn't aware of being retroactively sort of fined, but I was told through my lawyer that I would have immunity for testifying, for being, for full cooperation, for essentially saying everything that, from my best knowledge of what had happened that night.
Okay. Had you been conveyed any type of immunity when you gave your statement to the Highway Patrol?
I was not told of any immunity. I was not told of any sort of legal action perhaps or anything in that time frame whatsoever. No.
Okay. So did you give a statement prior to knowing if you were going to get in
I
trouble?
did, and again, the highway patrol document is the most raw version of that, and there's no external factors are in the background. for that.
Okay. And has anyone conveyed to you, say, if there weren't an immunity agreement, the possibility of you being charged with any crimes other than those related to you being underage and getting alcohol?
I wasn't told of the specifics of the crime. I was just told that it was along the lines of just drinking underage.
Okay. And have you been requested or encouraged by me or anyone with the highway patrol or any law enforcement officer, or anyone with the DA's office, to either embellish, exaggerate, or lie about your testimony?
No, been told to be as truthful and honest about my understanding of the events that happened.
Okay. If someone had told you that you need to lie about what happened that night, would you do it?
No.
Nothing further on direct.
Business with the defendant.
Yes, sir, Your Honor, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Shaw.
Good afternoon. Yeah.
My name is Roger Smith. I'm one of the lawyers that represents Chandler. You and I have never spoken about the case before, have we?
I don't believe so. I believe you may have tried to contact me through a private investigator, but we have never been in official contact.
You recall our private investigator contacting you at some point.
Yeah.
You and I haven't spoken personally about the case.
No.
Before this moment right now.
No.
You're currently a senior at UNC, is that right?
That's correct.
Were you in your junior year? You were a rising junior when this happened.
So it was the summer, the transition period between sophomore and junior year.
In between sophomore and junior year. You're originally from Atlanta, is that right?
That's correct.
You first met Chandler, I believe, y'all were, it's not school anymore, you were in the same year at Carolina, is that right?
That's correct.
You went through fraternity rush together the fall semester of your freshman year, correct?
That's correct.
You pledged fall, he pledged spring.
That's correct.
On the night of July 18th, you were sort of late coming to the fraternity house. What had you been doing? I'm not trying to get too personal, just what had you been doing earlier in that evening?
So, some context. I was there that summer taking classes, and I worked in a research lab on campus. And so I had finished up work. I lived in an apartment a little further away, and so I just finished my things and came to the fraternity house Friday night to see if anyone was at the house. So there was dinner. That's the only thing I had or did before reaching the house.
So this summer, you were living in an apartment, you were not living in the SIGEP house?
I was not.
Did you live in the SIGEP house at some point?
At some point, yes.
When was that?
It's the sophomore year.
Sophomore year, during the school year?
During the school year, yes.
And I'm just trying to get a picture. During the school year, you did live in the SIGEP house.
Mhm.
Summer, you were living in an apartment, is
Yes,
that right?
that's right.
Okay. This was July 18th into the early morning hours of July the 19th. How often would you go over to the SIGEP house? After school finished, sort of up until this time, how often would you go there?
During the summer or as a
Yes,
whole?
sir. Yes, sir. I had a question. During the summer, when school ended, regular school year ends, you start working at the research lab on campus, how often would you go to the SIGEP house?
Not frequently. If I did, it would be on the weekend.
Similar to this night, you stopped by to see what was going on.
Exactly.
And you had been in touch with Chandler earlier via text about going out that night, right?
I believe so, yes.
And mean, I don't know if it was just a text between you two, maybe it was a group text, but about going to a pregame party at Rebecca Green's, right?
I can't recall the specifics of the text, but if you have it, then sure, yeah.
But there was something going, there was talk, chatter, texts about going to Rebecca Green's house at some point, right?
Sure.
In the summertime there, this summer, how many people were living in the city house?
I can't recall.
Don't have any idea?
I can give you a rough estimation, but that's
That'd be fine.
speculation.
That's fine.
Perhaps 20 people,
20 people living there in the summertime,
perhaps.
give or take, that's fair. What time did you get to the city house?
Around 11-ish, sometime late evening.
Got to the city house around 11?
Sometime around then, yes.
Had you had anything to drink at that point before you got there?
No.
Had you worked at the research lab until 11?
I worked until about 7:30. I went to the student recreational center, so the campus gym. I'd gone home. I'd made myself dinner. I'd showered. I'd come home. And I'd come back to the fraternity house.
Right.
Yeah.
Just trying to get an idea of where you've been. So when you got to the fraternity house, around 11 o'clock on Saturday night, did you go inside?
I did go inside.
Who was in there?
I believe I saw Case Aldridge, but I can't remember specifically other individuals.
Was Austin Hamilton there?
Austin Hampton, and
Hampton.
I believe so. I can't recall my engagement with him if I did see him.
Was Connor Fitzpatrick there?
I believe so. Again, I can't recall.
What about Mason McConnell?
Again, I believe so, but I can't recall specifically my interaction with either of them.
What about Joe Lopez?
Same answer. I don't recall the exact context. I don't recall seeing them, but if that's the case, that's the case.
I'm just asking you what you remember, and I'm not trying to say, do you remember all of these people in a group when you got there? Just focus on individually, okay? And because my question may have been confusing. Was Joe Lopez living in the fraternity house this summer?
He was living in the fraternity house, yes.
When you arrived there at 11, did you see Joe Lopez?
I can't recall.
Was Mason McConnell living in the fraternity house?
I believe so. I can't recall if he was living there or somewhere else.
What about Austin?
I believe he was living there in the summer.
Connor?
I believe he was also living there in the summer.
When you got into the fraternity house, you hadn't been drinking anything.
No.
When you got in there, do you remember anybody, any specific people, fraternity brothers of yours, that you saw?
I can only remember seeing Case. It's not a matter of me not being able to remember. I just cannot remember seeing other individuals that night or prior to leaving.
Prior to leaving, is that what you said? Prior to leaving? Up here.
Yes, ma'am. You drove from, after working at the lab, showered up at home, came to the fraternity house. You drove there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Did you pull in the fraternity parking lot
To park my car, yes.
to park your car?
Yes.
Were there other cars in the parking lot?
It's a parking lot. There are multiple cars in the parking lot, yes.
How many cars were in the parking lot?
I can't recall the specific number of cars that were in there, in the lot.
Do you recall seeing Chandler's Jeep in the parking lot?
I can't recall because I wasn't looking out for it, so I can't recall if it was there or not.
That's fine. We'll take a short recess for you. Ladies and gentlemen, those you see the jury box, during our recess period, do not talk among yourselves about this case. Don't talk to the parties, the witnesses, or the lawyers about anything at all. Further, do not to talk to anyone else, to allow anyone else to talk with you, to say anything in your presence about this case. Don't do any individual research or investigation on your own about any issue touching on this trial. Stay with your smartphones, and do not form or express an opinion about this case during this time. After everybody else for remain seated, I will excuse the 13 of you and ask that you return and assemble in the jury room 20 minutes to the hour for this 10-minute recess. With that, you are excused.
Do I sit here, sir?